Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herbert Bateman. Today we want to discuss a book I wrote entitled Charts on the Book of Hebrews. It's part of Kriegel Charts of the Bible series, and it's divided into 4 sections. The first section deals with introductory consideration for the book of Hebrews. The second section deals with Old Testament and Second Temple influences in Hebrews. The third section deals with theology of Hebrews, and the fourth section deals with exegetical matters in Hebrews. Now, I wrote this and compiled this group of charts to help streamline study in the book of Hebrews. And what I thought we might do today is talk with Tim Sprankle. Tim Sprankle's visiting with us today. And Tim is a senior pastor at the Leesburg Grace Brethren Church here in Leesburg, Indiana. And so I thought I'd ask him a few questions and have him dialogue with us concerning the benefits, strengths, weaknesses of this project, this book of charts, how it may have assisted him in his preaching of the book of Hebrews. So Tim, why don't you share with us your series that you're doing? You're currently doing a series on the book of Hebrews. And why don't you tell us how it is that you came about doing the series, and perhaps share with us how this book of charts has helped in your preparation for this series.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We decided to do the book of Hebrews for our sermon series when I was sitting around the table with a couple other pastors, and we had said, hey, what have you been preaching on? What have you been preaching on? And none of us dared tackle Hebrews. It's a challenging book. Anybody who studies it knows that it's really challenging, although the Christology in the book is amazing, and I want people in my church to love Jesus. And so that was really the driving force behind why we went about the book of Hebrews. But then you're weighed down from the very beginning. No named author, no certain audience. When was this written? Why was this written? And right away your book comes in to be helpful, because in the first section of the book, you've plotted how different commentators and commentaries address the issue of audience, time, why was this book written, and maybe even some suggestions about who wrote the book. And so from the get-go, this has been helpful as I started to look at commentaries and Bible background books as well.
Okay, so as far as introductory matters, it streamlined the discussion for you, so you didn't get bogged down on that. How about other sections? The section on the Old Testament and Second Temple material, was that helpful? How was it helpful? How was it helpful?
Yeah. One of the unique things about Hebrews, again, if anyone studied it or tried to teach or preach through it, you find out right away that here's an author who has a tremendous sense of the Old Testament text. And even in addition to the Old Testament text, some Jewish styles of interpretation, hermeneutics, that aren't necessarily the way we would do it nowadays. And so I found that the second section was really helpful, not only because it gave us an overview of all of the Old Testament references, but even how those Old Testament references worked together. There were some things going on with key words that are linked together, and some key themes that were not only being discussed in the New Testament, but sometimes were addressed in, let's say, the Dead Sea Scrolls, like a character like Melchizedek. Some of that stuff doesn't necessarily translate to a sermon on a given Sunday, but if you can, on a regular basis, point to people in your church to the fact that this author of Hebrews really knows his Old Testament, and even has an understanding of how people in his age are understanding the Old Testament, then I think it gives them a deeper appreciation for, and hopefully a desire to start reading the Old Testament. So I found that second section helpful along those lines. You've taken all of the different quotes, keywords, and even some of those extra biblical sections and put them together in a format where you can track it very easily. The priesthood section was really helpful. I remember looking at that in great detail, and then tracking the idea of the Son, because those are two major themes in the book of Hebrews, is that Jesus is the Son and he's the priest, so he is this royal priest figure. And that was all traced out in your charts really in a helpful manner.
Okay. Now, the section on the theology of Hebrews, where we deal with some theological themes in Hebrews, was that very helpful to you as you were thinking and plotting your sermons and Does anything stand out in your mind? I'm kind of catching you, putting you on the spot here a little bit.
No, that's fine. I have used it for some. There were certain key words that you would trace in the theology section. The series that I'm doing is called Better, and it's a study in Hebrews. And I'm really interested in that idea of better that shows up 13 times in the book of Hebrews. You had other key words, key theological themes that were developed, the idea of salvation, the once for all. And you know what was especially interesting, but also one of those dicey issues is the warning passages and how you go about dealing with the warning passages. And I don't even mean you, because a lot of what your work is here, how do other people understand this? So you're synthesizing a lot of different people's research and making it so I don't have to read 20 books. I can read a couple pages in charts and at least get a grasp on what's the overall conversation. So I remember those ones in particular, those particular. I haven't looked at every single chart, though, and spent a ton of time with each one. But as it comes up, as I get to each week's passage, I do thumb through here and see, okay, which chart's going to help me from the beginning? And this is one of the earlier resources that I go to, in addition to a couple commentaries.
Okay. Now, you've graduated from seminary with an MDiv degree, and you've done some significant work in working in the Greek text, and so you have some exegesis background. The fourth section is for a person like yourself who has some of that exegetical skills, and you've developed some of those skills. Was that fourth section very helpful to you? I deal with some figures of speech, some text critical things. You may or may not refer to them, but did you find yourself gravitating to that? Rare words that are unique to Hebrews.
Yeah, I've done a little bit with the word study. I think one of the things about that last section, I had to dust off the cobwebs in my head, because you go through a lot of the different figures of speech, not just the chiasms, but you're going through all sorts of ways that words, two adjectives go together without a comma. I can't even remember what that word means. But so it's so detailed that it points, I thought, like, okay, I'm never going to get into this in the sermon. But you do a good job of laying it out and giving examples. So you do re-explain. If the cobwebs are in my head, you actually defined the terms for me, and I found that to be helpful. Oh, yeah, that's what a merism is. And then you gave an example from Hebrews and sometimes an example from somewhere else. And that's just another plug for this book, is you've actually put some things in here, just old New Testament history, that would be helpful if I'm studying any general letter, or if I'm studying any New Testament book, because you've laid out some of the timeline of the New Testament. And in this last section would be helpful in that sort of way too, because it reminds me of all the different figures of speech and rhetorical devices. But I don't spend as much time with the fourth section.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So it has been a help to you as you think about, and you use it in the beginning. So as you're thinking about working your way through, you start there because it gives you big pictures of stuff. What would you say would be strengths, weaknesses, something you wish that were part of your of this chart book? What do you wish that may have been there? Feel free to share on that.
I don't even know if this is possible, but sometimes these charts, I'll find certain topics that you cover, and if I'm in a passage in Hebrews where he's talking about the Son again, I could just look at your chart every time where Jesus is referred to as the Son. It sure would be nice to have, if I had purchased a digital copy, to be able to put it up on the screen rather than me having to go back through. So if there was almost a way to make it useful in that sort of format, so I don't have to retype it every time myself, and sometimes I'll do my own list as I go back through, but if I can just look here, a digital version of that is where I can somehow use it as a demonstration in my teaching. That would be really helpful.
Now, I do believe Kriegel does make these charts available online, that you could buy a digital form of the book. But that would be something to check and track down with Kriegel and in their catalog. But that might be something that already is in existence. But that's a good plug.
Yeah. One other thing that's in here too that you didn't mention, and I didn't mention yet, is toward the very end. I think it's after the fifth section. You have basically a paragraph that summarizes each chart or each section of charts. I actually think that's sort of buried in the book, but that's helpful. You have numerous charts on the high priesthood, and then instead of just looking at the charts, I can flip there at the back, and you give a little more detailed summary of how those work and how those line up with what other people were thinking at the time, let's say in the Dead Sea Scrolls or something. So that's a good section in there too. I've actually twice, I think, in a sermon quoted from that last part because the way that you phrased it there was really helpful in what would line up with my sermon.
Oh, good. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining with me and sharing with us, your use of this charts on the book of Hebrews, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. Until next time, thank you so very much, and have a great day.